Hi, everyone. Welcome, and thanks for joining us for Stars of Franchising.
Get ready for a roller coaster ride through the world of franchising as we bring you the best stories of inspiration and entrepreneurial grit and turning dreams into franchise realities.
That's right, Vinny. From emerging to global brands, we'll chat with the genius minds behind the magic. All brought to you by the Tariq Farid Franchise Institute at Babson College. I'm Ab.
And I'm Vini. Now, buckle up for some serious inspiration.
We're really excited to welcome a Babson alum, Liz Roberts, CEO and founder of Redbird Fitness, a Pure Barre franchisee, to our podcast. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's really great to have you here and share some of your story. And we always love to start with asking our guests to tell us what their why is and what calls them to do what they do. So I'd love to hear your story, Liz, and a little bit about your why.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously being a Babson undergrad, I've been interested in business since I was a kid. My parents are entrepreneurs, much smaller scale. I grew up on a farm in Vermont. They got into real estate, went to Babson because, looking for a business program. And I, went on the track of entrepreneurship and finance, came out, I did financial consulting, and I used to joke that I'm learning what not to do. So it was like turnaround, restructuring work. So I always had in the back of my head that I was going to run my own business. So, when I was a consultant, it was literally, let's learn what not to do. Financial crisis happened, coincided with me getting married and moving. And so, I want to say it was a last resort, but I got into wealth management for a short period of time. I remember having the discussion with my father about, well, at least they'll pay you to get all the exams done and continue on during the crisis when, the financial world kind of seized up a little. So I did that. And then when I started a family, I realized that, I really want to do something for myself. And I've always been an athlete, played some sports at Babson, played sports growing up, and loved to work out. And so at the time, bar fitness was something I didn't even know what it was.
Right.
To me, I played stick and ball sports.
Yeah.
I didn't do ballet or anything. So I started seeing this word thrown around. And I'm like, I'm going to try it out. And so I'm married at the time. I have one kid at that point, and I went to sign up for a class actually in Wellesley because there was a studio there and I couldn't get in for that weekend. So I booked my husband and I, who's also an entrepreneur, in for the next weekend, and also a Babson grad. So we're drop, I don't know, $25, $30 for the class. We buy the socks, the sticky socks that are required. And we're pretty athletic. I'd run a half marathon. He was an ultra runner at the time. And it was the hardest workout we'd ever done. And I was like, I love this. I want to bring this to Western Mass. So I took one class before I applied for the franchise, which is actually pretty rare in our brand. I came to realize that, but that is how I got into it. So a little bit blind, but a lover of fitness and trying to find a passion that I liked in a less risk averse way, through franchising.
Wow. Wow. Oh my goodness, where do I start? Liz, again, want to say big thank you for just taking out the time to meet with us. Uh, Let me start by asking you a question about misconceptions a lot of people have about franchising. In your opinion, what do you think the biggest misconception is about franchising?
I think that, and I think I struggled with this a lot as well, is it entrepreneurship, right? Knowing that I wanted to start my own business, in some ways I was like, gosh, is this the cheater route?
Yeah.
And I think that is what I often hear others say. And what I've come to realize that it's not, that it's the less risk averse way because you're buying a model that's proven.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I had some success. I think everybody's definition of success is different, right? And so I was learning early on when I started, what's my definition of success. And at first, I felt like I had to go big with franchising, but that's shifted over time. But I think that misconception of is it entrepreneurship is, I think, what the most misunderstood thing about franchising is.
What would you say to people, even some of your former Babson classmates, who said, "Hey, Liz, you're not an entrepreneur. You took the game, the playbook of someone else, and you're just running with it." So, what would you respond? What would be your response to people like if they say that to you?
Yeah, no, I mean, I would say, yeah, I totally understand that opinion, but the reality is that you're still running a business, right? Which is really the bulk of it is managing people. You've got a product that you got to get to market. You've got, there's still all the same things that you do. It's that you just didn't develop a product. You didn't have the original idea. And, in my view, it can be better, right? Because I've got an expert, and I've got a team of people doing the same thing around the country that are my peers that I can say, hey guys, this happened to me, right? When you start your own business, you don't have anybody you can pick up the phone and call who knows exactly the same seat you're in, right? The term, it's lonely at the top. It's less lonely at the top when you're a franchise.
Yeah.
If your franchisor allows communication between the franchisees.
That's such great advice because you're right. Liz, you're entrepreneurial, you're dealing with labor and your consumers. And I think for a lot of people entering, they entering franchising, they feel the same way. But I love your definition that it's actually you're reducing risk. And all entrepreneurs want to reduce risk and achieve their goals. So I think that's great advice. One of the things I'd love to touch upon is your selection, right? And you had the class, you took the class, you had a passion, and you aligned that with your interest and previous and lifestyle as an athlete. Can you talk about, for folks entering franchise, maybe how important that is or isn't for when you determine if you want to take the plunge in franchising? But then, as you took your step to evaluate the franchisor, what did you go through? How did you evaluate that the company was right for you once you knew you liked the experience?
Yeah. I think, it kind of goes back to that story of how I got into Pure Barre. Before then, I had started, when I had my first child, I started doing small business consulting, kind of helping small businesses with cash flow modeling and different things. And I was like, this isn't the business that I want to start. And then I had this dream, being from Vermont, dairy farm background family. I was like, I'm going to become a cheesemonger. So I decided, so I decided I'm going to learn how to make cheese. And then I took a course and I'm like, yeah, maybe this is a good retirement job. And then because I at some point I had a second child, I was making a lot of my homemade, like organic baby food type of thing. So I actually created an LLC, met with the commercial kitchen, and I was going to make pouches, local delivery pouches. And then I started meeting my lawyers and whatnot, and the risk involved, with two little kids, I was like, this is too much. I think, God bless my husband. He's like, what if you harm a baby? And I, yep. And so, as you're looking to find out why franchising, then I find this bar concept. And I'm like, man, the risk is low here. I can do this. Nothing about running the business scares me. When you talk about why that concept, it existed in Boston. It didn't exist in Western Mass. So it was a proven concept in our area. It was and it still is one of the top bar concepts. It was a newer concept, which appeased me because, it's a little bit sexy. It's new, right? It's not, I'm not a Dunkin' Donuts franchise, love Dunkin' Donuts, but, it was a new thing, right? So it's exciting. And so, I vetted it out, but I didn't vet it out a ton, right? Because you're still taking a risk of, will this brand work in my market? And I think, we're talking about misconceptions is that it doesn't also mean that you're going to hit a home run, right? There's plenty of franchisees out there that, struggle with the operation of a business and being an entrepreneur and they can't run their studios well. or they have a much higher learning curve. So, coming from Babson with a finance background, out of school for a while, this running of the business, it's never easy, but it came a lot more naturally.
Yeah.
So I was able to succeed, but it doesn't guarantee success by buying a franchise.
So, Liz, I mean, you attended just one session, and then you fell in love with it. So, like love at first sight, and then you decided to apply to be a franchisee. So, was it the whole process of applying or being approved and everything? Did you see that love at first sight all through, or can anyone dream to also have that? Is that what you advise? You love it, go for it. Or maybe, hey, there are some things you have to take care of, even though the love is there, the passion is there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there has to be some passion. I mean, there's that adage, if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. There's plenty of days where I work, right? And, don't love what I do, right? But I think that comes with any business, especially a fitness business during COVID. So I think that it was enough love at first sight for me to apply and say, I want to explore this further as the business I want to open, right? I didn't identify as, with two little kids. I wasn't finding any traction in the business I was trying to start. I was looking around. I couldn't quite find that idea. And, this is the first thing that popped out to me. I was like, I want to take this risk. I like this workout. I think it's going to go. So it was love at first sight, but I would say, which also differentiates me from some of my fellow franchisees, is that wasn't like I loved the technique and I had to bring the technique. To be honest, one class, I didn't really know it that well.
Yeah.
I just knew the concept was going to work. I saw a business model that I could replicate out here, where my first location was in Western Mass, and go from there.
I see.
So how many locations today, right now for you?
Yeah, I have, I have 11 today. On Friday, I'll have 12.
Wow. And where's the 12th opening?
It's going to be officially announced, but it's in Newburyport, Mass.
Okay, great. Oh, that's and so you've grown and the franchisor has grown. How about your perspective, Liz, on what great franchisors do? Either through Pure Barre and what you've observed with others, and from your perspective as future entrepreneurs or even existing franchisees, evaluate their franchisors.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And it's evolved over time. There's actually a great book out there called The Wealthy Franchisee, with you probably know it. It's a Edible Arrangements franchisee. And when I first read that book, it really kind of had one of those aha moments. And I think, that and being one of the largest franchisees of my brand, I've been on a lot of councils and I have good relationships. And so, I think there are things that a franchisor can do to be a better franchisor. And having gone through COVID, I think those, a pandemic, those things have become, paramount to success. And I think the first one is transparency. The more transparent, I think it goes both ways. But if the franchisor is transparent on the why they're making a decision, right, that affects you, then it's easier to swallow, even if you don't agree with it. Yeah. Right. If there's transparency that you can understand, then I think that is a room for success. And then the transparency also, it's communication, right? And then that trust factor. And so those kind of all tie in together. If you have a franchisor that is operating in the best interest of how your success is, because I think that it oftentimes, because the franchisor gets paid on our top line, it's easy for them to ignore the bottom line. But as the entrepreneur, the only thing that matters is the bottom line, right? And so, I think that's where this distrust can come if you feel like your franchisor is only focused on the top line when your bottom line isn't very good.
Well, you talk about it, and I love the way you put it. It's that healthy tension, right, with the the different interests, but having a franchisor that is empathetic and understands that your unit economics and you have to be profitable as a franchisee is extremely important. Let's twist it a little bit, and you're obviously the biggest and probably one of the best in the system. What do the best franchisees do? And advice for franchisees as they navigate and obviously try to have one be profitable, but if they want to scale, what do the best ones do, Liz?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's, I think part of it is same thing. It's transparency, communication with the franchisor. I would emphasize just communication, right?
Mhm.
If you have a good relationship with them, then you will have a good avenue to ask questions, to get resources. When I started Pure Barre, it was a different franchisor. I think we've gone through like 3 or 4 different private equity
Yeah.
groups, different things until we were bought. And I've had bad franchisors also, right? And so I've seen the difference between all of them, right? I've seen the franchisor that seems like the only thing they care about is selling more territories, right? And not developing, helping systems for the franchisee. So I've gone from,
Yeah.
various ways of this relationship. But with my current franchisee, who's been our most successful, I really feel that there's more of a partnership, right? But it's you only get that partnership if you communicate and you try what they're doing. So the franchisor has all the data, right? And so you would think that they're making a very good educated guess. You can still question that, right?
Mhm.
But their role is that they can see, the mistakes hopefully magnified or the trends magnified so that they can give you their best advice, right? And being in communications with them and
Mhm.
doing the trainings or the Zoom calls or whatever it is, right, is what's going to make you be the most successful. I'm not saying that you have to be like a minion and follow the play,
Yeah.
right? You're still an entrepreneur and you got to do what's in the best interest of you. But understanding what they're saying and communicating with them and having those relationships is the most I think what makes me successful is that everybody on the corporate team I know
Yeah.
personally,
Mhm.
and they even know my staff, right? And so I trial things for the brand, I'm vocal,
Yeah.
and I think that helps with my success.
Well, before I turn it to Vinny, I'm sure that trust helped during the pandemic too, because I know there was probably no business cases for shut studios and no EBITDA revenue. But how did that relationship and partnership help you during the pandemic in the system?
It's a great question.
And sorry to bring
I
that
remember.
up again. We're
Yeah,
through it.
no. Yeah, no, it's totally fine.
Yeah.
I think, it was actually one of the most difficult parts for a franchisee, right? Because you've signed an agreement where you're going to operate under certain
Condition.
parameters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So conditions, right? And so this pandemic hits, and it really hits New York and Boston first. So my franchisor is in California,
Yeah.
and they didn't really believe me when I said
Yeah.
I'm going to have to shut my studios, right? I'm going to have to break our franchise agreement and live stream my classes.
Yeah.
I was the first one, I believe, to tell them I'm live streaming on Facebook. I don't know what else to do. I'm shutting my studio tomorrow. And I remember I got on a call with the CEO and he was like, I've been through this before, speaking of the financial crisis. And I was like, I understand the financial crisis and this isn't that.
Yeah.
And obviously, I was in finance during the financial
Right.
crisis, and so it was interesting, right? And I think that if you go back to your question before, I think that relationship that I
Mhm.
had, I was able to be honest and say I'm breaking the franchise agreement
Right.
and I'm live streaming my classes,
Hmm.
and they said to me. You have to do what you have to do to keep your business alive. And what was really interesting for me is all of a sudden I'm in a franchise and I am the franchisee, and all of a sudden the franchisor is lagging in decisions, right?
Mhm.
So I am making decisions, and I had like 2 or 3 of my friends that are also franchisees, and we cut the path for the whole brand,
Yeah.
right? And all of a sudden I'm writing the guides, and everybody's like, "Can you send me what you're
Yeah.
doing?" Right? And so all of a sudden I really felt like I was in this leadership role in our corporate team because they couldn't act fast enough because they're covering every
Everybody.
place, including Texas to Montana up to New York. They couldn't react, so I had to react ahead of them and break rules,
Yeah.
right? And so it was really interesting time and an uncomfortable time, but I think I just communicated a
Yeah.
lot, and I didn't hide what I was doing, and it worked out for the best.
Wow.
Well, that's great, and it points to a lot of the innovation, right, comes from the franchisees in the market, and they're looking to you. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. But kudos to you for being resilient and doing what you needed to do. But also, it sounds like they were listening and they realized what they couldn't do. So that's great.
Well, Liz, talk about a bit, elaborate on this innovation you undertook during the pandemic. Uh, what, apart from this whole idea of let me live stream, I break this FDD, yeah, and then I just live stream. Are there other things, innovation during the pandemic that really stood out that even as we speak, it has continued even post-pandemic? If,
You know, it's a good question. And for us, at the end of the day, we're fitness studios, and we took a really big hit in our brand from the pandemic, and it was rough, right? Everybody canceled their fitness memberships really everywhere, right? And so, and landlords only work so much, and there's still bills to be paid, and what I think one of the hardest things is that I think a lot of franchisees didn't understand is why is the franchisor still taking taking a percentage when we're suffering. But I'm like, I was always of the mindset, well, they just lost 60% of their revenue too.
Yeah.
Right. So we're all in this together. So I think, the question is hard to differentiate for me from the fitness industry that changed a lot because there was so much thing, we all know the Peloton story, what's happening. I think brick and mortars are coming back. And so we are pretty much trying to operate at that old model. The fitness in general is always continually evolving. So we've got new class types launching, which are new to us. So that's the innovation, but that's not really like franchising as a platform specific. I think that, if we think about what's changed, I think it's probably what's changed out throughout the whole world is that there's more trainings via Zoom, and that's comfortable for everyone. There's more communication that's happening that we've had that's remote, if you will. So, my days of sending people to get trained on a flight with a hotel expense are down, right? Because we're training virtually, right? And everybody's comfortable with that now. So, that's really probably the only, I think, the change for the franchisee is that there's been some shifts in the way that we can train and communicate. And we're going to have to always have a live stream option with our platform, but we had one before anyway. It's just now, because of the pandemic, it's an expectation, not an add-on. And so I think that hopefully that answers the question of what we've been able to do.
Right. Now, if I may follow that up by asking you, Liz, to outline what recommendation or advice you give a group of people that are thinking of becoming franchisees. What would those advice be?
I think it's, find an industry that you're attracted to. You don't have to be in total love with it, but you want to like what you're doing, right? And there's enough there. And I think do your homework. You can request their franchise disclosure agreement and see their numbers. But if you can talk to another franchisee, not just one, try to get a hold of a couple to do your homework. That's the best thing. And then, really consider it opening your business. It's all, I think anybody that starts a business will tell you it's all about hiring the right people.
Yes. Well, that's great advice. And, as you learned in our showing, it takes a lot to really not only launch and execute, but to scale. So let's talk about scaling your venture. When did you make that decision? And maybe it was early on, Liz, that you wanted to be a multi-unit operator, one, and then two, can you talk about some of the challenges to scale, whether it was 2 units to 5 and how you managed that trade-off between building your infrastructure to support the number of units and the timing of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did the classic bootstrap on my first studio. And I did everything that you're not supposed to do in finance. And I emptied every last dime I had to open my studio. 0% credit cards, did everything. And so I couldn't afford a multi-franchise agreement. And so I knew I wanted, my ideal was to have 3. Okay. And that was what I felt like I wanted to have. And when I opened my first one, I was pregnant with my 3rd child. So now I have three children. And so I thought that was about all I could handle. And my husband at the same time was growing his business. So we're both business, people. And when I opened my first one, I gave birth to my daughter, my 3rd child, about 3 months after it was open. And it was interesting when you develop a market, all of a sudden people are like, oh, well, I'm going to open one, right? It's a risk of franchising. I'm going to open one. And I had my territories in my head, but I couldn't afford to secure them. at the time. So, the big joke that everybody that's friends with me knows is that after I gave birth, I pulled out my laptop and I bought that second territory in the hospital. And so that's how determined I was to, secure my market. And from there, I grew one at a time, but I started acquiring studios.
Okay, good.
And the first one that happened was, I was operating 2 studios. My third territory that I originally dreamed of had gotten purchased before I could do it, and I was okay with that. But I got a call from our corporate team, somebody that knew me and said, "Hey, there's a studio." I was actually in Northborough, Mass. That the franchisee is not following through on. Will you step in at the last minute? They have a lease almost fully executed, like all these things. So it's about an hour from my house, and so I had the discussion with my husband. I said, okay, well, right now when you own 1 or 2 franchises, I joked, coming from finance, like, I got a decent paying job, maybe low paying job, but I loved what I did. So to me, I was like, I control my own schedule. I'm able to be a great mom. I love what I do. There's a lot of benefits to the brand I own, for like personal, like self-growth and community benefits. So at that point, when I got presented with that, I had a discussion with them, said, this is where it changes to an investment, right? Where the model changes. I'm not the manager and I'm not the face. And so we decided to go for it. And that was the first time where I hired somebody else to be the face of the studio. And so I would say that was the first pivotal moment where I went from me being, the operator to hiring somebody else to operate. And so that had its own growth pains. But at the same time, I then bought 2 next to it. So within 5 years, I went from 1 to 5, and then I actually went to 7, and the pandemic hit. So in a very short time, I started buying studios and building at the same time. And I think with your question of how I scaled, I made a lot of mistakes, right? But I think the biggest thing is to continue to learn and continue to be flexible, right? Being a small business, you can be flexible, right? And I think, the more I manage people, the more I realize, like, okay, being direct, being candid, and saying, hey, we tried this, it didn't work, or, moving on and cutting your losses as fast as possible. Those are learned skills based on mistakes, right? And even when the pandemic hit, I lost 60% of my revenue, like, very fast. And I had to change my model again, because I kept all my full-time staff employed. I tried my instructors that were teaching, from their houses, I paid them time and a half, trying to do the right thing and stay alive. And, but at some point, in my industry, the PPPs only went so far, and I had to then say, okay, how do I operate lean so that I can stay open? About 1 in 3 gyms closed in the US. So, the goal was to stay open, to make it through. And so I had to become lean and change my management structure again, right? So I didn't have so much overhead or whatnot. And so now we're coming out. We're not back up to the revenue from pre-pandemic yet across the board. I've added 2 sites though since then, and the third coming, in the next week. And it's still, we're shifting back a different management style now that we have more demand. So it's ever evolving, I guess, is the long-winded question. Right. But I think I've done everything I can to continue to educate myself, to know I'm not the smartest person in the room. I used to teach the classes when we first started. I don't teach classes anymore. And my goal, just like with management and teachers, is that my goal is to hire people that are better than me, right? And make sure that they hold me accountable, and question me as well. And I think that's how you can scale, is just continuing to educate yourself. I read a lot of books. I'm a member of EO Boston, and that's been helpful for me to kind of figure out how to navigate and grow during the pandemic, how to stay lean and alive.
Liz, so Liz, can you mention about making mistakes? That you made a lot of mistakes. Which ones stood out of all the mistakes, and what were your biggest takeaway from those?
Managing employees. I think I think I'm a natural optimist, and I think that my mistakes are around managing people. I think, it's a natural mistake to I think I'm going to talk through the pandemic, right? It's about managing payroll, right? So for me, when my revenues went down, I have so many fixed costs. There's so many variable left to manage. And so some of my biggest learning curves to this day are managing people and how they can take advantage of you, unfortunately, right? And seeing that. And so I've become smarter at the back end. So I don't want to constrain my employees. I don't want to put too many policies in place. So I've tried to operate smarter on the back end so that I can let them do their job. I do advertise their job. When they manage a studio, I advertise it to them as, you're entrepreneurial. This is going to be your studio because I'm not the face of it.
Yeah.
Right. So I think what I've learned is, and my biggest mistakes are, how do I say it's entrepreneurial and put enough checks and balances in place where I don't start getting burned by an employee that's no longer doing the best interest for the company. And so I think I've done a really good job. I've got consistently, I don't really lose a lot of people. And a lot of my staff tell me they love working for us. So I think that makes me feel good, but I got there through mistakes.
And what was the magic when you start picking some of your staff now? What's the magic formula or secret sauce, basically? Just making sure that you have the right person, that you don't get
For me, I think I've got a great education at Babson, and there's a lot to be said on a resume, but I end up with internal candidates that I see the promise, and then I grow them from there.
Okay.
In fact, the woman who is my second in command, not that long ago, I was in a car with her and I said, hey, can you tell me your resume? Because I have no idea what it is. Like, what did you like? Tell me your background all the way back. Because she just did so well. She immigrated to the US, started working at the front desk, and I just saw that promise. And now she basically runs the company.
Wow.
Right. And so to me, it's like just seeing that diamond in the rough, right? And looking at performance and never, and just, raising people from the inside has been my formula for success. And people can come in, but they understand our culture pretty fast. And that is that we move fast, we have fun. And, if you're not having fun at the job the majority of the time, then maybe you need to find a job someplace else.
What great insights and leadership. And I think for our listeners and for others, it shows a pathway, right? If you believe in the culture and you can start at the front desk and become a multi-unit manager, or like you said, help you run it. So that's really great advice, and that sure is entrepreneurial to scale during the pandemic via acquisition. One thing I'll point out, which is interesting too, is those relationships and partnerships and strong performance as a franchisee led to opportunities for corporate to call you, right? And then, so maybe talk a little bit about, is that pipeline continued, and then are you continuing? It sounds like be active on committees. Tell our listeners about how some of those committees work and how you established a good relationship with the franchisor teams, especially as they changed over time.
Totally. Yeah. And so I think, the committees developed with this current franchisor when they purchased from the franchise from the prior franchisor, they created these committees, and it was even like how to convert software. Right. And so being one of the biggest ones, I'm like, I want to say, I just want my voice to be heard because I have an opinion and I'm boots on the ground. Yeah. And if even though like me physically I'm not boots on the ground, I listen to all, I have 170 people that are doing the job. And when they tell me an inefficiency, I'm going to do my best to get that fixed. Yeah. And I'm not going to do that very well if nobody's listening to me. And so these brands exist, these boards exist so that we can have a voice, right? We don't always get heard. And sometimes there's, some abuse, that happens. But at the end of the day, I know that I'm heard and I've had a voice, even if they don't like what I've said. And for me, it's made me have a relationship so that I can send an email and they know who I am and they respect my question or opinion or, whatever it is, and I get a response back. And so I assume all franchises have these boards, right? And the idea is not selfishly just for yourself, but it's to represent the brand, because Pure Barre is only as good as every other one that you step foot in.
Right.
If you have a bad experience stepping into a studio in Florida, are you going to step into one when you move to Massachusetts? I don't know. And so I think from my standpoint, I want the whole brand to succeed. The other part that comes with it is that I get asked a lot of questions from fellow franchisees now, and I'm on a lot of calls with prospectives people looking into the franchise. And I remember a while ago I had a conversation with our brand president, and I was like, some of these people are not qualified, and I'm sorry, but I told them that. She goes, no, that's why I sent them to you. Right. Because some people call with this, I love the classes. And it's like, okay, it's not all fields of roses on the other side. Right. Let's have the reality here. Right. And so I think that also comes with there. And it feels good to help other people. Yeah. Right. And it feels good to have a say and be heard. And I think you have to have the maturity to be heard, but not your opinion taken.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
Oh, wow. Liz, if you look back your trajectory now, is there something that you would do differently, and why?
Well, I kind of wish I didn't own fitness studios in the pandemic, and I owned like a grocery company. I don't know what I would have done different. It's hard. I got, I early on in the pandemic, I weathered it well, because I realized right away that the loss of business and the way my business flipped was not any direct relation to me or my staff, right? It's unfortunately what we were in. And so, it was hard, because I bought about 4 or 5 turnaround studios, meaning the studios that were not doing well, right? And so I had bought them in those prior years of the pandemic and turned them around. So, in the middle of in the pandemic, maybe now, should I have bought an unsuccessful studio and tried to turn it around? I would do it again, because who's going to think of a global pandemic is going to hit, right? And so, I've got some locations that are still struggling because they didn't have any margin to lose.
Yeah.
Right. And so, that's painful, but I don't think of it as a mistake. It's just, what happened. And there's some mistakes, like I paid too much for my first studio that I bought, turn around but I've learned how to put a multiple and evaluation on a company now. Right. And so do I regret that? Well, no, because I learned through the process. Right. And how would everybody makes mistakes. And so I think that I try not to regret things in life anyway. I just try to learn from and move forward and keep looking forward. So that's kind of my answer.
At least just quickly, you said that you took over about 2 or 3 studios and turned them around. What was it? What was the key for you to unlock something that was doing incredibly, doing badly, and then what's the least key? What's the least Robert key? Yeah.
Yeah, I think some of them are culture issues, right? You've got a bad culture. I think when you're a client and you walk into your gym or your studio that you exercise, you're going to know if people are happy to be there or not, right? And the person that's teaching that class, if they're happy to be there, they're going to teach a much better class, right? So some of these studios, I had cultural issues, right? And it's a hard work to turn culture around, much harder than shoring up expenses, right? Because you can come in and streamline expenses, but culture is really hard to turn around, but it can be done. And I think that would probably be our magic formula, is to get a working culture, because, in my industry, I've got a lot of part-time employees. These fitness instructors run the gamut of, stay-at-home moms to forensic scientists to teachers, right? And it's their part-time job. And if they're not having fun, it shows. And so that culture really helps us run a studio that, from what the way I describe a fitness studio is, people in general, they have 3 places. They have their home, their work, and their third place is usually their fitness studio if you got a place, right? Where you're going the majority of the time. So if that third place is not a happy place, you're not going to go, right? And so we try to describe ourselves as we're their third place, and they need to come in, have a high-end experience, and feel like they can leave their baggage at the door and come in and feel good and walk out with their head higher, the back straighter.
Wow.
And that's our goal, and that's a culture thing. And I think, I think that's the magic sauce, because anybody can come in and, streamline the bulk office expenses, but creating the culture is so much harder, and having the right people there to do it.
Wow, that's amazing. Congratulations.
It's that experience, and I love it because you've found a way to take what worked in your markets and have it apply to your team members in the other markets. Let's talk a little bit about the impact you're able to have in a community and in the world with your solution. Vini and I talked to our guests about diversity, equity, inclusion, pathways to entrepreneurial success, and also for your employees. Talk about what that means to you and how you're showing by example in your brand, and maybe what the franchisor is doing on those regards also.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in our industry, we are a community-based workout, right? So that's how we advertise ourselves. And we are inclusive. We are not an exclusive brand. And so that comes with a lot of gamuts. It's diversity, inclusivity, but it's, through multiple facets, right? And in our industry, we're like 99% women, right? And so not only do we have diversity of race and gender, but we have body inclusivity. Yeah. Right. And that goes both ways. So, for us, it's hard because you've got maybe a woman who appears too thin that you're worried about, but you get body shamed if you're too big.
Interesting.
And it's a very touchy subject. And so for us, I try to lead by example. So, like, for example, Thanksgiving, we don't talk about calories. We don't say, let's do our workout so we can eat more. No, it's like, let's just live our better lives, right? And it's those little things consistently that we support and that we're inclusive of whoever walks in our door. They can come and find a place here. And I think people really appreciate that in our communities. And I think that anybody that knows us would say that they know that of my studios, is that we are an inclusive, safe space. Yeah. And, there's been a lot of hard things that I've had to deal with and uncomfortable conversations, but I'm more than happy to have them at the end of the day, because it's the same thing with my staff culture, right? We've all got to have that culture. And that's how we make the world a better place. I think that we've come a long way with body inclusivity, right? And what strong looks like, and what, a woman's goals are. It doesn't have to be you walk in the gym, you need to lose weight. Yeah. You can walk in the gym and say, I just want the stamina to play with my kids longer. I want to be able to carry my groceries into my house. Whatever your goal is, that's great. We'll welcome you. We'll give you the best workout for you, right? And for what your goal is. And I think that is what community is about. And it's that non-judgment zone when you walk in the door. And that's what we really I try to lead by, and my staff tries to lead by, so that when you don't feel any, anything when you come in the door. And we always say the hardest thing is for that person to walk in the door. The last thing they need to do is walk in the door and feel shamed or judged in any way.
Liz, what has the world of franchising taught you that you think everyone, and most people, should find a way also at hopefully learning that, either within franchising or elsewhere? What would that thing be?
You're saying learning how to, be inclusive and create a community in their business?
No. I mean, in general, everything you've done in franchising now, being a franchisee, if you look back now, you want to say, you came to Babson, you learned a few things, and then you went out there, you did a lot of things, and then you zoomed into franchising. Is there something that you learned while owning all these franchise operations? And then what is that thing that you think, hey, this is one big learning that I've taken away, and I think most people should find a way of hopefully learning this also at some point in their life?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think, I've always been that kid that raises my hand in class. And I think that continues in a franchise, situation where I'm going to question it until I understand it. And I think that is the key, right? Is that even when you're in a franchise, you still got to raise your hand and ask
Oh,
questions,
good.
and understand the why, because sometimes the franchisor doesn't, right? And you've got to question that as the franchisee, because at the end of the day, I joke, right? But my joke is real, that we pay the franchisors salaries, right? And so who works for who here,
Yes.
And so if we don't give them feedback, they are not set up for success. And that's how I feel.
Wow, what great learning, Liz. Thank you so much for spending time. You're an incredible leader and representative of Babson, and taking what you've learned here and onto new heights, and so many great things we heard about, from resilience and pivoting to going from one baby to now 12 or maybe 13, however many that is. But appreciate your engagement. Love to help you here at Babson any way we can. We'd love to have you on campus here at the Tariq Farid Franchise Institute, but keep doing great things, and we appreciate your time today.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. And I hope, somebody from Babson decides to go the franchising route someday.
That would be great. Thank you, Liz. There's one question. That was the preamble. There was a question we usually ask our guests, and that's one thing that keeps you awake in this world of franchising.
That's
what
right.
keeps you awake at night?
Cash flow.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Cash is king or queen.
That's awesome. Hey, Liz, thank you so much, and bravo for everything you're doing, and then for also continue to fly the Babson flag out there.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, Liz.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Stars of Franchising.
Stars of Franchising was produced at Babson College, engineered by Travis Gray. Karen Soa is our guest coordinator, and music by Ralph Taylor.
If you like Stars of Franchising, be sure to review us wherever you get your podcasts, and spread the word and share these stories any way you can.